everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of GCC's Georgia Chiro Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Kathy, and this is a topic that we bring up often because it is so important for our doctors, for our students, for the associates, for those coming into practice, and for those who've been practicing a long time. And this is HIPAA compliance. And today we are talking with Dr. Ty, the compliance guy. Hey, Dr. Ty.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. I don't know how people will be doing after we get done with them today, but it's all good.
You might make some people nervous, huh?
It happens.
All right, let's start with the most basic of basic questions. And this one comes up all the time. Do I have to be HIPAA compliant? Yes or no?
Well, it's not exactly a yes or no. You have to be HIPAA compliant if you're a HIPAA covered entity. What does that mean? Well, in the chiropractic world, it basically means that if you file any insurance electronically, if you transfer any records electronically, if you check and verify benefits electronically, even if you don't file insurance for people, any of those things make you a HIPAA covered entity. So in general, if you've got a computer and you're using it, in all likelihood, you're a HIPAA covered entity. If you happen to be all cash, all paper, you might be outside of HIPAA specific. Here's the problem. If you're outside of HIPAA and someone complains, you still have to protect their information. If they complain, then the government tells them that doctor's not a HIPAA covered entity. And then they say, well, what do I do then? And they go, you have to sue them. Now the doctor has a lawsuit against them, has to prove what they're doing to protect their information anyway. And so they're actually better off to actually put a HIPAA program in place, even if they're not required to, because then they can get on a witness stand and say, I'm not even required to do HIPAA, and I still do it because it's the state of the art. So I tell everybody, my recommendation, if you're in practice, if you got a patient coming through the door or you're going to visit a patient, I would have a HIPAA program in place.
Okay. And so the doctors need to have a written plan in place. Is that one of the requirements?
Yes, there's a lot of requirements, but it must be customized to their office. There's nothing you can buy a 500-page manual pre-made and put it on your shelf, call it a HIPAA program. It has to be customized to your office, and it has to be what's called active and dynamic. Now, we don't know what that means, but here's what we do know. We know that every year, just in HIPAA alone, that's the only kind of compliance we're talking about at the moment, there are about 12 required reviews, evaluations, or self-audits you have to do on different parts of your HIPAA program every year, year after year, or your program is not compliant. It's not current. It's not compliant. The law tells you you're installing this piece of this program to do it this way, and it will tell you in the law when you have to have a formalized written review of that section. If you then don't do that, you put the program in place, it told you what you had to do, and you didn't do it. That's called willful neglect under the law. Willful neglect under HIPAA is a minimum $59,255 fine. So we do know that active and dynamic, every time we've had to defend a chiropractor to the government, that has been satisfied if we've done the dozen or so evaluations, reviews, and self-audits that are required and have those documented, formalized. Typical chiropractic office starting out, it's going to be a 300 to 800 page manual that's required to cover all the bases. About 100 pages of that are just simply required written documented policies you have to have in your office. Now they'll have to be tweaked for each office to make them fit, but it's usually around 100 pages for a typical chiropractic office, just on that section.
Just on that section. And so in order to be HIPAA compliant, you have to have this type of a manual on the premises.
It would be extraordinarily hard to do it any other way. What you have to do is you have to have written documented proof that you have met the requirements under the HIPAA law. So if you put all that in a file, a manila file, and you print it off of your computer and you stick it in a file and say, here it is. It's not a manual, but it's a file. Well, if it had everything in it you needed, that would probably actually suffice. However, the easy way is to have it typically in a 3-ring binder because you have to keep making these additions all throughout the year, these dozen or so things. They have to be added into something. They're written documents that have to be kept, and they have to be kept in chronological order and all of that. So just the way to organize it is to have a manual. Any other way is really cumbersome, and you're more likely to forget something or miss something and end up with a problem.
Okay. Now you mentioned something And you almost glanced right over it as if I didn't hear you, but I did. And you said when you have to represent a chiropractor who has been sued. I mean, does this happen often? Is this like once every 10 years a chiropractor actually has a problem with this, like in the whole profession?
I'm really glad you asked that question because this is a shock to everybody. And I also need to clarify something. I am not an attorney. So when I say I represent a chiropractor to the government, what I mean is I act as a liaison, a go-between. I hold the doctor's hand. If they get in trouble and they go to your help desk at GCC, that's my help desk where I will help them and I will help walk them through the process, mainly tell them what not to do as much as what to do, because most doctors step into poo-poo immediately. And my biggest problem is getting them out of that and then getting on down the road. But so far since 2010, every chiropractor that we have that has had what's called a defensible position, meaning have that program in place, and we've represented them loosely, not legally, represented them. We've been able to get them out of fines every time, 100% so far. Hope that continues, but it's the government. They can do whatever they want. Now, obviously, if it ever goes in a courtroom, we'd have to have a real attorney with a license to broach that. But so far, we haven't had to do that. Now, the question you ask, how often does this happen? This is something that shocks doctors. And the reason it shocks them is these are federal investigations. So when they come after you, it could affect your PPO contracts. It could affect your licensure. It could affect your malpractice. It could affect your standing in the community. Doctors don't talk about this stuff. They talk about it to me because I'm like the homicide detective of HIPAA. The homicide detective knows all the murders going on in town. You might hear about one or two on the news, but they know all of them. Well, people come to me because they're in trouble, so I kind of know about most of them. And to answer your question specifically, I get 2 to 4 calls a month from chiropractors who are in trouble. They've either been notified by the government they're under investigation, or they've been accused by a patient of a breach of information or mishandling of their patient information, and the doctor's concerned they're going to be reported to the government and face an investigation. And or the doctor just knows they've had a breach, like a computer ransomware attack where they've been breached, they've had information stolen. There's certain things that have to be done by law, not just under HIPAA when that occurs. So when you kind of put those together, cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, being notified by the government you're under investigation, and kind of being put on notice by a patient that I'm going to do something about this, I'm after you, that happens about 2 to 4 times a month. So this, and we figured it out. I speak for 48 state associations and 6 colleges, and I do about 30 events a year around the country. We've guesstimated that I've actually physically been in front of about 7,000 chiropractors. Well, there's about 35,000 practicing chiropractors. So that means only 1 in 5 chiropractors would probably even know to call me if they had a problem. And it doesn't mean all of them that know me call with a problem. So our guesstimate is this is more like 20 to 40 times a month, throughout the profession. Maybe we get a bigger percentage of calls than someone else might. I'm sure we get a bigger percentage, but maybe we get a bigger percentage than I'm anticipating. But I know personally we handle at least 2 to 4, and sometimes there's 8 or 10 in a month, and sometimes there's 0, but it averages out about 2 to 4 a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all that taken into consideration, for the doctors that have been in practice a long time and are listening to this going, wait, what? I thought I was exempt from it. I thought I didn't have to do anything to do with HIPAA. Where do they start cleaning it up?
That's a really complex question, because there are also state laws of what you have to do to protect information, which are going to be, if they supersede HIPAA, if they're more strict than HIPAA, they actually replace that portion of the HIPAA law, but not the rest of the HIPAA law. So you've got to put HIPAA in place and then make sure your state stuff is under control. Now, again, if you think you might not be a HIPAA covered entity and you're going to try to kind of say I'm exempt, well, you don't know until you're in trouble. You can't go to the government and say, am I exempt? They will not, they don't do that. They do not evaluate your office for you and tell you where you're at. You're charged with doing that yourself. So HIPAA is so complex. At my website, I'll give some contact information after a while. I've got dozens of free white papers through the GCC help desk. You can access those free white papers, webinars. I've done tons of webinars. The law itself is about 1,700 pages. There's also the high-tech law that ties in, the minimum necessary laws and breach notification laws that are outside HIPAA, but they all are wound up. It's a very complex thing to figure out. I'm just going to say straight out, you're better off with professional help. Most people would rather I do it for them. But that was a blatant pitch, which is not really a pitch. It's really the best way to start, because what you have to have is called a defensible position. You'll never be 100% compliant. It's impossible. The auditors and investigators don't always agree on what constitutes compliance. It's impossible. What you have to have is a defensible position. What that means is, and why it helps to have real help with this, is if someone kind of knows the ropes of what goes on, what they look for at the government, and how to access that information to stay current with that, then they can help make sure that your program that you put in place hits all the high points, it hits all the requirements. Then it becomes defensible. And what that means is, this will really bottom line it, I can eventually get to the point with the government where I can say, what else could we reasonably have done more than what we did? Right. And if they end up saying, well, really not much else, then we're in the clear on fines. They might slap you on the wrist and say you have to turn a report into them in 6 months showing X, Y, Z. That's a win. If you get out of fines, it's a win, because the minimum willful neglect fine is $59,255, and punitively they can go up to 1.7 million. So these things can get very nasty if they want them to. And so, but if you're going to do it on your own, you got several laws you need to read, figure out what's going on, figure out what you have to do, what you have to author this manual, and then how those other laws fit into it. Again, we've got all kinds of webinars, all kinds of white papers that will help you down that path. Or if you just have a specific question, you can certainly get answers to questions. You can call me and get an answer to a question, or email me. Glad to do what I can to answer any individual questions. But to get a really formalized program in place and also cover OIG compliance, which is required if you treat one or more Medicare people per year, the new No Surprises Act and what you have to do for that, the safe harbors in place, the Cures 21st Century Cures Act and what you have to do with that. I mean,
it's a lot. And here's the thing, I do want to point out that you have been a great partner for GCC for many years and have helped us set up the compliance help desk on our website. For those people that are watching right now and didn't know that was there, on our website, georgiachiropractic.org, you can go to the compliance help desk and ask questions. And a lot of the stuff might be there, or you can ask actual questions. And Dr. Ty, you would answer those for them.
Absolutely. I'll do everything I can to answer the questions.
As I'm sitting here listening, my brain is saying that is way too much time to figure this out. For the average doctor, not for you, because this is something that you understand. Right. Yeah.
I have plenty of time to do it and still can't stay on top of all the changes. In fact, every year I go to the Washington, D.C. Cybersecurity and HIPAA Symposium. Why do I go there? Because at that symposium, it's a bunch of geeks talking about how you have to protect information and meet the law. But it's put on by the Office of Civil Rights. The office, if you mishandle someone's patient information, you've violated their civil rights. And that's who comes after you, is the Office of Civil Rights in conjunction with the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. So it can be real nasty. But the Office of Civil Rights puts this on. They're overseen by Health and Human Services. They're dealt with the Office of the Inspector General. There's overlays for the Federal Trade Commission, and there is Homeland Security. Physician office cyber attacks have now been designated as a national threat, and Homeland Security is now involved. So at these symposiums, what they do is there'll be representatives from all of those organizations, agencies that enforce. And they're talking about a portion of what they do is talking about who they're after, how they catch them, what they do to them, the parts of the laws they're not enforcing, that they don't care about, and the things that they think are coming in the future. Now, if my job is to protect you in practice, I think I need to know that information. The problem I see that really frustrates me is not only is there new information every year that has nothing to do with what's written in the law. So you have to not only know the law, but what's outside the law,
right?
The formalized law. But there's people there from the hospital administrations, there's people there from the insurance companies, there's people there from I have never met, and I know most of the people there are the same people every year practically. I've never met another consultant there, not another person that teaches or trains HIPAA at that meeting where they're talking about who they're after, how they catch them, what they do to them, what they're not after, what they don't care about, and what they see in the future. That scares me. So one of the things I do warn people about when they get my answer or they look at our materials, sometimes they'll go, well, I've been to a HIPAA course before and I never heard that. Or I have a HIPAA program, but it doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. So I just encourage you that if you're concerned about something that you see with these different things, that aids that we give you, and you want a clarification of some sort, before you just decide, I don't know what I'm talking about because somebody else taught you something different, pop me an email or give me a call and let's talk about it, because it's a lot of times I try to point that out, that it came directly from the horse's mouth, the enforcers in DC, but I don't say that on every single sentence of everything I do. So please, if you're concerned, and every once in a while, since 2009, every once in a while, a doctor actually says, I don't think that I heard this or found out that or whatever. I think maybe you're not right on that. And I go search it, and by golly, something happened that I never found out about. It's not like Washington, D.C. wakes up every morning and goes, hey, you know what? We did something on HIPAA. Let's notify Ty. I'm on every notification thing I can get from them. I've got inside contacts, but this is a huge topic, as you can tell. And so if somebody's got a concern, I enjoy having them pose that to me, because it may actually be something I do need to, find out that I didn't realize. Although we are pretty darn good at what we do, and that doesn't happen very often.
So let me ask you this question. For the doctors that have associates, or for doctors that have multiple locations, how does HIPAA compliance work in their situation if they've got multiple associates in one location versus different locations?
Okay. Now I'm going to make my disclaimer. I'm not an attorney, and this does not constitute legal advice. Things are changing and morphing constantly in the world of compliance, and therefore make sure that you check with your attorney on anybody. Okay, got the idea? Okay, this answer is different for different situations, but let me give you a little bit of an overview. If everybody's under one roof, even if there are multiple licensures, MD, DC, PT, multiple DCs, they're all owned by one entity. They all work for that entity as an employee. Then one HIPAA program, everybody is treated just as an employee, like any CA that would be in the office or any staff, support staff. One program covers everything. Now, when you start talking about independent contractor setups and partnerships, and you start talking about, well, this MD has 20% ownership in the facility, and so these three DCs have 10%, and we're really partners, we're really not. Well, they're an independent contractor that works for me. Wait a minute. Do they make all of their own decisions, or are they following your office procedures? If they're following your office procedures, you are telling them what to do. If you're telling them what to do, they are not an independent contractor. You may think they are. You may have it set up that way for tax purposes, but if you get caught, they're going to go back and demand all those back taxes you didn't pay by trying to avoid matching the taxes by making them independent contractor when they really weren't. That's an attorney issue. Okay, I'm warning you about an issue. I'm not trying to tell you the dynamics of that issue, because it's fraught with alligators. But if the person literally, they're a W-2 employee working for you, or they're an independent contractor that you call and represent, they're an employee, then one program will cover. If you start talking about true independent contractor or true partnerships, you need an attorney to put that together. If you're talking about multiple locations, all owned by one entity, then what happens is technically you have to have a HIPAA program at each location. The reason is part of the HIPAA program has to have a site map that shows and makes X's where you have electronic devices. Now, it can be handwritten. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to get a blueprints made, but you've got to, if you've got a computer at the front desk, you've got to have an X on the front desk and one in the insurance department. Well, that's going to be different at every location. Potentially staff is different at every location, and you have to have their names in the book. You've got to have, what they're doing, what they're being taught. Now, granted, a lot of your policies might be the same and kind of, copy and paste, you might say, but it is a more complex situation when you do have multiple locations. You can put all the locations under one program, with that program having all the individual location differences stuffed in that one giant manual. Okay. You can do it that way. You might have to have each of those independent locations have a little document between that location and the main location that says they are basically abdicating their HIPAA program to this other location, which is contracted to overtake and oversee their HIPAA program. But then you're still going to have that umbrella entity notate all the differences that are at each of the individual locations. That's at a minimum. The best is actually to have a truly separate HIPAA manual and HIPAA program for each location.
So I will tell you, probably more than 15 years ago, I had a patient who worked for an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm guessing it's more than 15 years ago, who was going through the training to become the HIPAA compliance officer for this orthopedic group. And at the time, it sounded like something so big brother, far-fetched, never going to affect our industry. It's really only for them because they're sending records back and forth between facilities. And that's not going to happen to chiropractors because so many of us, we just print our HICFAs and mail it off. And it was so easy to stick your head in the sand, whatever this was, 15, 17 years ago, and think it's never coming our direction. Listening to this, I can't imagine trying to do any of this on our own.
I could not if I was in practice. Now, understand, I had a very big practice. In fact, I had the first $1 million chiropractic practice way back in the dinosaur days when they flew pterodactyls, flew the earth and all of that. And I still consult to and help mentor personally to some people to build multi-million-dollar chiropractic practices. And I do have this other business for compliance. I do a lot of different, wear a lot of different hats. I can tell you that as I think a fairly astute businessman, if I was still in active practice, I'd write a check to somebody and say, do it. I would not even consider taking my time, because whatever time you take, 20 hours, 100 hours, 200 hours, if you spent a tenth of that time just doing a little more marketing, even going out in the public and just pressing the flesh and meeting some people, you will end up with more new patients that pay you more money. One new patient will usually pay for a program.
Sure.
If somebody would and then you're on with all that time to do. We all went to school to work with chiropractic miracles. We didn't go to school to be documenters and insurance documenters and clerks and compliance officers. Let somebody else that's the pro do that. That was not just in that area. That was always my practice philosophy is, hey, get an accountant. They're a pro. Get an attorney. They're a pro. Get the pros to do what the pros can do. Make sure it's right. Go to sleep. Get good malpractice insurance. Go to sleep at night so you can focus on the patients and getting people well. Because that's what our passion is. That's what all of us love to do. These other things are truly interferences. They're things that are in our way. They inhibit us from it. But if we can get it off our shoulders, go to sleep at night, get rested, go back in to do what we do, then we stay in the game. We don't get burned out. We don't quit. We don't get to a point where we reduce our practice to go semi-retired because it's so much stress. No, we want to see more people and do more stuff and help more people. And we're excited about it. And that's what that does. This is a full-time job for me, just to stay on top of it and make the changes in forms and the changes in policies and all the things we have to do and get that distributed out to people that we work with. And, people get caught in ways they don't expect. They get caught up in things they didn't know. I used to, before 2010, an interesting thing happened in 2010. What happened in 2010 was this thing called electronic medical records came along. And the government started actually paying you to put in software to do electronic medical records. And then you had to do a thing called meaningful use and show them you were using the electronic medical records in a specific way. Then they would actually pay you money. They pay up to $20,000 to pay you back for the software you bought, blah, 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 blah. When that happened, the information that we used to as chiropractors store on our hard drive in our office on a computer, and you often unplug it from the wall, except plug it in once a week to file insurance or once a day to file insurance. It wasn't even on the internet a lot of times, other than for a few minutes. Where's that information now? It's all in the cloud. And because of that, now the hackers come in. They started hacking information and stealing our valuable information they can use for many, many different purposes. They can sell a full, what they call medical file, a healthcare file, for $500 a piece on the black market. So they can get big bucks for this. They don't care what size you are. They don't care how many patients you see. Size does not matter. All of the people on the internet trying to hack into your, and now they've learned how to hack into your stuff after they hacked into the cloud for the electronic medical records. They get more and more sophisticated. And they don't care. They don't know how big you are. They just want access to your data, however much it is. And so I used to say before 2010, or I still say before 2010, you might have been able to stick your head in the sand about HIPAA. Well, everybody gets trouble with HIPAA, and I have people sign something before I send their stuff anywhere, and I don't have people, they can't see my file, so I think I'm okay. And you could have just stuck your head in the sand, and you might have made it a practice lifetime without a problem. Today, I say you stick your head in the sand, put your butt in the air, it's getting ready to get kicked. And the reason is they're coming after you on your computer. They're trying to get in to break into your stuff constantly. Right now, they're trying to break into everybody on this line. And you've got all of the written and paper and documentation and people talking and overhearing and all the other things that can go wrong with HIPAA. In Washington, D.C., they say at the symposium every year for the last 3 years, doctors need to stop asking the question, what would I do if I got investigated for HIPAA? And start asking the question, what will I do when I get investigated for HIPAA? And I thought, well, that was a little dramatic. And then they said, because our intention is to audit every single doctor's office. At that point, I thought, oh, there's a scare tactic, until they said 3 years ago, this year was the first year we did random audit sampling. They contacted several hundred offices, said, send us a copy of your risk analysis. Send me a copy of your most recent ICER. Send me a copy of your written disciplinary policy. Different things to different offices. And they said it was extremely successful. What does that mean? That means they found that virtually no one was compliant. They had the ability to find everyone. And now they are encouraged to do random audits. We got lucky. The pandemic hit. I bet you never hear somebody say lucky about the pandemic. Health and Human Services got a little busy when the pandemic hit. They oversee the Office of Civil Rights. They shifted their attention away from starting into random HIPAA and compliance audits onto dealing with the pandemic. Now what we're seeing as the pandemic winds down, starts to go away, they're getting back on track. I had the first contact last month from a major malpractice carrier in our profession, Home Insurance, telling me they are now starting to see the rise of the government intervention into cyber attacks and into audits and investigations kicking up, where their clients are saying, hey, does my cybersecurity insurance help cover this and that type of thing? So we're seeing the pandemic wind down. We're now seeing this ramp back up, but it bought us a couple of years to get time to get programs in place. And over those years, we got a couple thousand programs in place, and it'll be very helpful. But there's about probably 33,000 more that need to be adequately created and in place to protect, because it's not just protecting you, it's protecting the profession. Because like right now, they're after dentists big time, because they found that if they go in looking for certain things in the dental offices, they find them and then they can find them. And now they are putting out direct stuff from Washington, D.C. saying, we are after dentists. We're going to make examples of dentists over this until this and this and this changes. So we do not want to get on that list as a profession. So it's not just about protecting your own office, it's about protecting the whole profession.
So we have a saying, I don't change my own oil in my truck. Never have, never will.
Me either.
Right? It's a lot easier to just take my truck to somebody else and pay them to do what they do. So it frees up my time to do what I do. Absolutely. Which is exactly what you just said. So as a GCC partner and sponsor, we are so grateful for what you do, not only for GCC and Georgia Docs, but for the profession at large. So can you tell us, for the people that would like to, first and foremost, find out, am I compliant? And I know you kind of sent me a little note and said, if you have to ask, you are not. Right. It's kind of like, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. If you have to ask if you're compliant, you're not. Because if you are, you would know it. So for the people that right now are listening and they know that they are not compliant, what is the next best first step for them to take?
The next best first step for them to take is call a meeting of themselves only, if they're the only one in the office, and document the meeting with themselves.
Okay.
This is required legally, by the way. Have a meeting, State the fact that you've been on a webinar, a broadcast or whatever, and realized you have some deficiencies in or you're concerned that you have some compliance deficiencies, and you're going to start on a routine, planned approach to perfect, correct any deficiencies that exist in your office. If you're going to use an expert to do it, put that in your meeting notes that you're going to contract with an expert to do it. Because the minute you say that you realize you're deficient and you are now taking action, you actually start down the path of a defensible approach. You give me something to say to the government if you get in trouble saying, hey, they realized they didn't realize before, which is not an excuse. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. But when you can demonstrate to the government that as soon as someone realized that they didn't just let it continue, they actually started down a path to make changes, and then they documented the changes they were doing, this starts to show intent. And intent is a huge part of defensible. And so you want to show you're going to do it, and then you got to undertake the process. You either got to start watching webinars, reading white papers, making notes that you have watched and you've read, and this is what you're doing to implement that piece, and then you're going to the next piece and the next piece and the next piece, and keep that going, or show that you've contracted with someone, and then that will create a work product. The person you contract with will create the work product at that point that could then demonstrate to the government what you've done.
Great. And if someone were to contract with you, do they have to still do a big chunk of work, or is this kind of a hand it over, done for you, couple questions, couple answers here and there kind of process? What kind of time investment are the doctors looking at?
We have one option, very inexpensive, that's a do-it-yourself kit that basically we guide you what to do and you author your own manual. I do not recommend it. It's a great program. It's fairly inexpensive program, but more than 70% of the time when someone purchases that program, and we tell them up front, most people tell us it takes about 20 to 25 hours to go through this stuff and use the templates where you can and follow the instructions where you can and watch the videos and do the training stuff that needs to be done. And then where we have to show you what to write and how to customize it to your office and blah, blah, blah. It's going to take you probably 20, 25 hours. So, well, I've got time. I can probably do that. Then they start to work on it and they put an hour into it, and then they realize their insurance billing's behind, or they had a couple extra new patients they can't get processed, and they kick the can down the road, and we get a call that says, Ty, just do it for us. We're sick. It's not that it's impossible to do. It's just, I don't have the time to do this. It's not getting done. It's not happening. And I figure the other 30% give up. That's my guess. Mm-hmm. Where we have a program that we've never had a dissatisfied customer is what we call our hands-off program. And in the hands-off program, that's where we author it for you. We author everything that you need done. And the way we do that is we send you 2 sets of questions. When you answer the first set of questions, we start actually authoring the policies. And while we're doing that, we send you a second set of questions so we can move down the road pretty quickly. Most doctors tell us it takes less than an hour to get together all the information they need to get together for us. Then we end up knowing as much about your office as you know about your office for the purpose of constructing a HIPAA manual that hits the customized pieces that need to happen for your office. And then we author it, usually 300 to 800 pages. We author that and we send it to you in written form, kaboom on the desk, breaks the desk. And we also send you the electronic file it was printed from. So you own everything. Now, this is really important because I don't usually spend much time thinking about what other people do for HIPAA programs, because I don't really have the time to go through and line by line evaluate what I think they should have done and didn't do or whatever, because I'm at Washington, D.C. hearing it from the horse's mouth. I focus on making sure mine has what really needs to be in there. I don't know what other people have, but I do know that there's a program out there that bugs me. And I'm not going to name names. I'm just going to say they charge $400 a month forever to construct your program and keep it current. The idea that you have to spend $400 a month to have a chiropractic compliance program is absolutely ludicrous. And so the other problem is it's an online program. Oh, everybody wants online. Yeah, they wanted that in 2010 when we built ours too. And they hated it immediately. They had to try to navigate a website, figure out what to do, nobody to ask questions of, nobody holding their hand through the process and giving them the guidance they need. And then when they upload the information to my server, who owns their stuff? I do. So this other company owns their stuff. So if they want to go do a different HIPAA program at some time, it gets a little too expensive, I think. They have to start over because it's not theirs. With our stuff, you own everything. You own the digital. You own the hard copy. Our program is set up two ways. Number one, if we build a program for you, it's a one-time expense. Never have to have another program because any changes in the law, changes in forms, changes in documents, you get for free on into the future. So you'll never spend another dime on HIPAA and several other compliance programs we give you as gifts as well with it. You'll never spend another dime unless you want us to do those 12 reviews, evaluations, and updates that have to be done every year. When we build your program, we tell you how to do all that, and you never have to spend another dime. Okay. If you want us to do that for you, the ongoing part, it is extraordinarily expensive. It's a whopping $29 a month, and it's no contract. You can stop whenever you want. So when we build a program and deliver it to you, you then, after a 4-month period of time of getting things initiated in place, you get 2 months free of that monthly program. It's called the MMM, Mandatory Monthly Maintenance Program. You get 2 months free to see if you want us to continue to do it for you or you want to take it over on your own. And it's your decision. And it's your decision to make it any time. There's no contract. You do it for 5 months and decide you don't want to do it anymore, fine, you just tell us. But I will mention, in over 10 years, we've never had anyone quit that program ever. The only people who quit that once they actually pay for the first one, you get 2 free. Some people say, no, I'll do it on my own. But the people who pay for the first one, we've never had anyone quit unless they died or retired, ever. And
so you're doing a good service.
Once you see what we do for you every month, the question becomes, why in the world would I do that on my own versus paying someone $29 to have it out of the way? Because one thing you have to do is you have to issue a security reminder to your workforce every month. And it's required that it includes certain current cyber threats. That alone means you have to go Google search what's going on in the cyber world every month and write up something to give to your people. That alone's worth $29. And so it's just, we put it in place because people said, can't you do this for us? And we said, well, no, we're not in your office. We can't do it. And then we basically kind of figured out how to do it eventually and put it in place as a service, not as a moneymaker. And so it's there. And the way it works is simple. We send you an email every month and you click a link. Okay. And when you do, it downloads the documents you need for that month, and you go through and you circle a couple things, check a box here and there, sign something, put it in your manual, you're done. Most months, 5 minutes or less, you're done. Yeah, you got the annual training that takes 45 minutes, but it's all on video, and you just watch it when it's convenient for you, fill out the forms that come with it, put it in your manual. So we do follow it up. And again, we've also got OSHA and OIG and all of that stuff, it is all in that program as well. So we've got a good program, and most people would just rather pay me to do it, obviously, than try to figure all this stuff out. And so obviously we offer that service. But our help desk for the association, those type of things, those are things we do as a public chiropractic service. There's no charge for those things. There's no charge to ask me a question, email me a question, or go to the Georgia site and just download whatever's there and access whatever you want to. We've also got things called Hot Topics. They're little less than 5-minute videos that I've cut based on different, like, does the No Surprises Act affect me? Well, most doctors don't have an hour to watch a webinar. So what I do is I do these little hot topics and I sum it up in 5 minutes or less. Here's what's happening. Here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to look at. And then I refer on to a white paper or webinar for more information if they want information. So there's about 15 topics that they could go to Georgia site, and within just a few minutes, they'll know the basics of what the issue is, what they need to do. And then they can make a decision on what they want to do, how they want to do it, and pursue it from there.
Well, fantastic. Listen, this is great information, so useful, so important to all of the doctors that are watching and that will be watching this. In the interest of time, because I know we're getting kind of past our point where docs got to get back to their office, how can people get in touch with you and find out more information?
Well, we've got several ways to do it. Maybe we could put some slides up here that have got some, here's some standard contact information and pricing. Now, I've got a lot of what you get up there in the left corner. You get your manual, you get the MMM program free months, you get a checklist that we do, you get a copy of the manual, you get OIG manual, there's a bunch that goes on there. But here's what the cost is if we do it for you. The hands-off program where we do it for you, it's $299 a month for 6 months, and you're done. That's it. You never pay another dime the rest of your life unless you want to do the $29 a month program. And during COVID, a lot of people didn't have money. They didn't have a cash flow when it just shut down immediately there at the beginning. So we set up a $99 a month program. That's not $99 forever. It's $99 till the program's paid for, and then that stops. So if that's better, easier for you, we don't care what option you take, but you can call us, email us, just say, hey, send me an order form. The order form has all the options on it, or you can go to drtythecomplianceguy.com/go. All those things work. And if we could pop up the next slide, here's other free gifts you get when you purchase that program. We talked about OIG compliance, which is required if you treat Medicare, 2 months free of the MMM program. You get the annual staff training that's required for free. It's on video. The alert list is where you pick up any new stuff we do, new forms, new whatever. Our OSHA program is adequate for a chiropractic practice as long as you're not doing venipuncture or acupuncture needles. If you're doing any sharps and piercing the skin, you might need a little additional OSHA over what we offer for chiropractors. The No Surprises Act and what you have to have for that, and the ONC information blocking law. The No Surprises and ONC, those went into effect about 2 years ago. Didn't hear much about them for a while. Christmas last year, they started enforcing. They were giving a year to 18 months before they started enforcement. We saw the first enforcement coming out the first of this year. And then the last slide we can put up has got a QR code on it, which just might make things a little easier for you to hit that QR code. But we're glad to help either whether we build it for you or just accessing the multitudes of information that we've made available.
Well, thank you so much, because this was a tremendous amount of information, great amount of time. I know we kept people a little bit extra, way more than we normally do, but I think the information was so important. The explanation and everything, your way of explaining the importance of this to people is much appreciated.
And I will be in Georgia for the GCC live twice coming up, one time in July, and I think the other's in December, but I can't remember. So
I believe so.
There, come see us live, where we can spend about 4 hours doing this really fun stuff, because there's a lot more information.
Yay. All right, Dr. Ty, thank you so much. Let me just run through our schedule real quickly, because I know you see it coming along the bottom of your screen, and it is on our website at georgiachiropractic.org. But coming up July 15th and 16th, we will be in Atlanta for our full CE program. We head to Augusta in August, made that really easy. We're heading to South Georgia in September. And of course, in October, we have our Chiro Cup. That's our golf tournament. That's going to be at Bridge Mill. You can get registered, but here's the cool thing. Registration just opened up for sponsorship. So as a team, as a player, you absolutely can get registered. But if you're interested in sponsoring the 6th annual Chiro Cup, you can get registered as a sponsor now. So check out our website. You can go to chirocup.com, or you can go to georgiachiropractic.org. That's October. November, we're down in Savannah. And of course, December, we've got that's our big convention. That's our Christmas event. Dr. Ty, I know you'll be speaking at that one, giving us 4 hours of unbelievably important and heady contact, information to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and protecting our practices. So thank you very much for coming on today and sharing all this information.
I appreciate it. It's fun for me. I know it's painful for everybody else.
It is painful for us, but I appreciate that you enjoy it, because it's much better to have you take care of it than for the docs to try to figure it out on their own. Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Ty. And for everybody that's been watching, thank you so much. If you have questions, Dr. Ty, thecomplianceguy.com, go reach out to him, or just go to our website, georgiachiropractic.org, hit resources, and go to the compliance help desk. And that's one of the easy ways to get in touch with Dr. Ty, get the information you need so that you can get your practice HIPAA compliant, so that you can sleep peacefully at night, knowing you've done what it takes. Thank you, Dr. Ty.
You betcha. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.